So, welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name is Hannah Fox. I am a customer success manager at Thrive, and I'm going to be co-hosting today's webinar with Olex as well. Do you want to introduce yourself, Olex?
Absolutely. It's nice to meet you all. My name is Oleksandr. We call me Olex for short. I'm actually one of the psychological therapists and the CBT practitioner at Thrive Mental Health.
Perfect. So, let's look at a bit about what we're going to be talking about today. So, we're going to be understanding stress, understanding anxiety, how these two things are similar, how they're different, different approaches to managing things such as stress and anxiety, some useful tools and tips, seeking support, and then we will have a bit of time as well for any questions at the end also. But please feel free to write in the chat, ask any questions. We've got our colleague Ella with us here today, who's going to be answering a lot of the questions that come through, but we'll be answering some as well. So please feel free to write in the chat. So I'm going to hand back over to Olex to kick us off with some stats.
Thank you. Yes. So stress or workplace stress has unfortunately been on the rise. It's hard to believe that COVID has happened almost 5 years ago, if not even 5 years ago to the day, actually. And unfortunately, as a result of that, we've had over 78% of people say that the pandemic has actually negatively affected the mental health. And recently, over the span of the last couple of years, we've also had a massive intake of clients and individuals coming in regarding workplace anxiety and stress. And also kind of other sort of statistics out there is 79% commonly experience workplace stress. So it's quite a large fair portion of individuals experiencing that. And as a result of sort of workplace stress and in a nutshell in general, about 55% also experience general anxiety. And we'll talk a little bit more in detail about the differences, the similarities, and the common themes that stress and anxiety actually have. And unfortunately, about a third of those actually turn to comfort eating. So looking at unhealthy ways of self-medicating, self-managing, and coping with those, and a staggering nearly half of people actually do lose sleep because it's a quite important, quite worrisome. So challenge difficulties, it kind of impacts your everyday life, your functioning, and so on and so forth. Kind of creates a very negative knock-on effect that just spirals out of control. And kind of also adding a little other further details, a fair portion of nearly 85% of individuals say that the mental health issues are causing further concerns. So again, it's often as a gateway to other difficulties and problems that can lead to depression, over compulsive disorders, sort of safety mechanisms, unhealthy habits, and developing unhealthy routines and depression and so on and so forth. So again, it's important to know and understand the signs and symptoms of stress and anxiety, how to kind of cope and deal with that as well, which we'll talk about in more detail. And obviously, what's really reassuring and quite positive as well is that 76% of workers actually believe that their company should be doing more when it comes to actually dealing and combating and helping individuals overcome stress and anxiety. So again, I guess the main purpose of today is exactly to meet those kind of parameters. But yes, when you're ready, Hannah, the next slide, please. So I guess the most common causes for work-related stress is definitely work-related office politics. So falling out, meeting deadlines, uh, personal difficulties, challenges, whatever it might be. I mean, we spend a fair portion of our life and our time at work. So it fundamentally does make logical sense why there would also be troubles and stresses and anxieties and concerns and worries surrounding that environment. There's also a lack of interdepartmental communications. So again, getting frustrated or getting annoyed or agitated when certain things aren't met, or there's miscommunication, misunderstanding within the hierarchies, and kind of can lead to kind of disruptions, disputes, stress, and deadlines, and other kind of elements. And this also kind of ties in a bit more as well with work performance of others. So, for instance, when you have reliance or dependency on individuals meeting certain deadlines or milestones or goals, and they're not met. So again, it creates backlash, further delays, and so on and so forth. But yes, thank you, Hannah. That's the next one as well. So interestingly enough, about 880, 228,000 workers are suffering from work-related stress, depression, anxiety. And unfortunately, I believe that is also going up, that statistic. And obviously about 17.9, pretty much 18 million working days are lost due to work-related stress, depression, and anxiety. And again, post-COVID, this number has also been having a significant impact, shall we say. Um, and obviously, stress, depression, or anxiety are usually accounted for well over half of all work-related ill health cases. People taking sick leave, being unwell, taking time off work, not meeting deadlines, and so generally just sort of stagnating or limited in their capacity and ability to kind of function day-to-day life, shall we say. 55% of all working days are actually lost due to work-related ill health. So there is a fair portion where it comes to that. And I guess obviously a general kind of statistic. I guess the UK economy, a fair amount of billions are lost as well due to work-related absences. So it has also an impact on the economical value. So again, it creates a massive knock-on effect, and sometimes it's worthwhile to address things more from the foundation point and from a bottom-up approach where we can actually help to kind of minimize and help you guys to support yourselves and those around you when dealing with stress, anxiety, to prevent it from spiraling out of control and getting simply worse and building up from there. Thanks, Hannah. So, psychoeducation, already big thanks for basically just saying, let's talk a bit more about what is anxiety and what is stress. So let's get cracking and jump in with that. So stress in a simple nutshell is just basically a reaction towards perceived form of threat or even pressure. And it usually manifests as a form of feeling of emotional or physical tension and the body's reaction to a challenge or demand. And unfortunately, stress is one of those things that we just can't remove, we can't get rid of. It's something that we naturally have as a form of a defense mechanism. We naturally have that to help us cope and react to certain challenges, barriers, and difficulties. Now, obviously, we are a long way past our ancestors who had to defend themselves against saber-toothed tigers and woolly mammoths. So our forms of stress are a little bit more first world based, but obviously our biological and primitive systems on how to deal with pressure still exist. So they're just transplanted to different areas. As a result, we sometimes can get a bit puzzled, a bit confused, or not too sure how to deal with those kind of worries and agitations. So again, psychoeducation comes in. And now looking a bit more into anxiety and what that is. So anxiety is another form of stress. It is a derivative of stress, but it is more longer term. So if you have stress for a long, long time, or you have a lot of worries, a lot of concerns, that will naturally manifest itself into anxiety. And it is usually defined clinically as a constant state of worry, a form of fear, and even uneasiness. It typically leads to physical symptoms such as even heart palpitations, difficulty concentrating, um, night terrors, sweats, those sort of things where you feel as though you're out of control. And in a really sort of simplified nutshell, anxiety is a worry about the future. It's always about what ifs, assuming worst case scenarios, replaying certain thoughts, and overly assuming and overly worrying about things that chances are might not even happen or happen very rarely. But it's that kind of fight or flight response that we're looking at, where you're always constantly assuming or worrying about worst case scenario and not being able to kind of be in the present, and you feel very out of control. And then on to the next one, please, Anna. So looking at a CBT approach, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. So the way we use CBT to help with anxiety and stress is by essentially helping to rewire and reshape your way of thinking. So we're not exactly looking here at trying to manipulate or trick the mind. We're here trying to kind of alter your perception and how you deal with elements of control and how to sort of manage certain difficulties of regarding stress and anxiety. So on to the next one, please, Anna. So how do you cover anxiety? A usual sort of typical form of advice I would actually give a lot of my clients on the first basis is actually writing down your list of all your worries and concerns. And actually take a red pen and just cross out everything that you cannot control. and you focus on the things that you can control. A lot of times, our forms of stress and our forms of anxiety often are triggered by things that we don't have any form of influence about. Now, it doesn't mean that you should completely drop trout and give up. What I'm trying to say here is that if you channel your energy, channel your time and your resources into things you can influence, then you kind of have a bit more of an incentive, a bit more of a rewarding approach. So say, for instance, you have to meet deadlines, but a certain work colleague isn't able to meet those parameters. When you look for more internal based about what you can control in that situation, you can shift your approach and your focus into those kind of elements, into those parameters, because you know that you can't control how another person might be able to do certain things, but you can control how you react to it. And it's looking at reaction that actually helps you to kind of manage and cope with the anxiety. Um, and the next part, pulling up from that, is even asking yourself, a lot of times we joke around saying, oh, if you talk to yourself, then something's not right with you, and so on and so forth. But the reality is, we talk to ourselves in more cases than we like to admit, and that is perfectly normal. It's perfectly fine. I mean, we spend the majority of our time with ourselves anyway, so it would only make sense for you to actually interact and engage with yourself as well on a regular basis. And what I mean by this, what I mean by this is asking yourself a simple question of how does this benefit me? Sometimes trying to break out that cycle and break out that loop can go a really long way, and that helps a lot in that situation. Or even pushing past that barrier, even feeding into your kind of worries or assumptions. Say, for example, asking yourself, what am I trying to avoid or prevent? You start to develop more of a problem-solving approach as opposed to more of a problem-inducing one. And even ask yourself, how many times has this actually happened? And a lot of times, 9 times out of 10, the thing they're worried about occurring or happening doesn't even happen in the first place. And it's always that what if assumption, or some kind of negative perception, or some kind of illusion that we have. So we try to protect ourselves by preventing it from happening. But how are you trying to prevent something from happening if it hasn't happened in the first place? Um, so again, you kind of start to look at the pros and cons and the facts and the evidence. And these are all really good, quick points to question using for grounding when feeling anxious. I'm just curious. I mean, Hannah, is there any sort of advice you can also recommend from your own perspective when dealing with like anxiety or worries?
Yeah, for me personally, I look to things like exercise, um, and yeah, getting out, doing some steps, being in nature, those sorts of things. They're very helpful for me. But on that second point there, asking yourself, I feel like I can relate that a lot to the CBT program in the app, something that really helped me kind of reframe any kind of worrying thoughts that I might be having as well. So yeah, for me, that second point on asking yourself has really been beneficial in coping with kind of any personal anxieties. But yeah, like I said, a lot of exercise as well. Obviously we know that exercise, sleep, good diet, all those things can help with this as well. Um, but yeah, that second point is definitely works for me.
No, and I agree. And it's good to sort of talk about some real world implications when it comes to it. But as Anna mentioned, it's very important to also stick to a healthy routine, having a balanced diet, exercising. A lot of times we kind of feel like when we are going through stress, challenge, and difficulties, we want to sort of put a head in the sand and hide away from the world. And that usually reinforces really bad negative behavior. And it manifests even into further complications, such as depression and other difficulties. And it's important to understand or even learn your own safety mechanisms, your own telltale signs of when things start to get too much, and actually intervene in those steps before they get worse. So I really do appreciate that as well, Hannah. And then on to the next one. So stress. So this is more of when to act now, when to prevent the stress from actually becoming a form of anxiety. Another really good sort of form of advice and tool to have is something that we call the traffic light system. So using a traffic light system is same as using traffic lights. Essentially, you use red, amber, and green. So red is usually used for urgent tasks, and you list those things that are more important that you need to kind of deal with right there in the moment. You could then integrate amber for important tasks, so things you have to do later on down the line, the things that don't require your immediate attention but are important later on. And green is just a really nice way of just positive reinforcements of maintaining progress, knowing that you're on top of things. And that ties in really well when it comes to crossing out things you can and cannot control, when it comes to worries and things that sort of you feel as though out of your control. And this kind of ties in really nicely with that as well. And then the next one is breathing techniques. I mean, a lot of times we all think it's quite silly. I mean, we all breathe naturally. It's an automatic response. But you'd be surprised how well breathing can actually help when it comes to dealing with stress. And there are different sort of techniques and methods, but the main purpose of breathing techniques is to essentially kickstart your parasympathetic nervous system, also known as the rest and digest parts of the body when it comes to recovering with stress and struggles and difficulties. And so there are different variations when it comes to it. The most common one is a box breathing technique, where you essentially take a slow, deep breath for 5 seconds, you hold it for five, and you breathe out for five. And you repeat that a few times. And that kind of starts to get your body to start to come down, to kind of start to analyze and process things in a more systematic way. Because under stressful situations, you get this fog going through your head, you get a bit agitated, you can't think straight, so you think a little bit more narrow-mindedly, and it becomes quite overwhelming. And so sometimes taking a step back, taking a breather, and you know what? Let's just slow things down a bit and try and regain that composure. Another one that works really well is some of that actually can be used sometimes in the military or even more sort of complex situations, is known as the 765 breathing technique. Now, if you have got a good pair of lungs, try and take a slow, deep breath for 7 seconds. If you can't do it for seven, do it for as long as you can. But try and take a slow, deep breath for 7 seconds, hold it for six, and breathe out for five. And also works remarkably well with calming you down and also helps really well with helping you to get to sleep. So if you're struggling with sleeping, this works remarkably well as well. And obviously another element that works quite nicely is using fidget devices, engaging in rewarding activities. A lot of times, especially life in the UK and just life in general has been quite demanding. And so we have a lot of things to do, a lot of stuff to engage with, and we can be stuck and glued at the office or by the computer or on the phones. And sometimes actually reminding yourself that you are human too, and you are allowed to have some form of pleasure, enjoyment, and activities. And just doing that is actually okay. It's usually recommended that you spend at least 1 hour a day doing some kind of regular activity. As Anna mentioned earlier, engaging in exercise, going outdoors, so on and so forth. And that works nicely because at the end of the day, you don't want to just be sort of obsessed with one particular form of stress or anxiety just work. You have to learn to take a step back and compartmentalize, where you give yourself that time and place to recover, to recuperate, and actually live for a bit as well. I know sometimes that is easier said than done, but you have to kind of gradually get into healthy habits and routines and regimes. And again, Hannah, is there anything you'd like to kind of add to that?
Yeah, just as I said before, really, getting into those healthy routines is something that's really helped me. Making sure that I exercise regularly, daily, something that specifically works for me. I know that everyone is different, but it's all about trying out things to see what kind of helps with those feelings of stress, anxiety, or panic that you might be having. Um, and yeah, I'm going to talk about more on the app towards the end of the session. But I'm going to talk about the breathing techniques and other techniques within the service as well that can really help in these sorts of situations.
Fantastic. And then what's on the next one? Let's move on ahead. So, prioritizing yourself, kind of as a sort of piggybacking and adding on to what I mentioned earlier, it is very important to put yourself first. Now, some people might talk about oh, it's a bit selfish or you can't be so self-centered in that element, but the reality is, though, there is nothing wrong with being a little bit selfish. There's nothing wrong with putting yourself first and giving yourself that time to recover and rest and just sort of establish some form of boundaries where you need to sort of take a pause and sort of putting yourself first in elements of engaging in physical activity, as Anna mentioned, even mental activities, like going to the gym, engaging in sports, even social interactions and engagements. That there was nothing wrong with reaching out to close friends and loved ones for when things are struggling and difficult. Because a lot of times, and I've had this time and time again in therapy sessions with some clients, where they don't want to burden people close to them because they feel that, oh, those people also have their own stuff they're going through, they also have their own challenges. But the reality is, though, I can guarantee you that they would want the exact same thing for you. They'll want you to reach out, and they'll want to reach out to you for help and support. And as my wife says, a problem shared is a problem solved, essentially. And there's nothing wrong with sharing that load when it comes to dealing with difficulties. And a lot of times we get so caught up in the moment that sometimes getting a different perspective, getting a different approach on the situation can go a long, long way. I'm guilty of that, and I'm sure a lot of us here are also guilty of that as well when we kind of get that sort of narrow approach, when we just look at one thing in particular and just get so enraged by it. Sometimes taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture can go a really long way when it comes to it. And again, this is where we talk about prioritizing yourself, putting yourself first, and actually reaching out for help before it gets worse. And the other part is also kind of piggybacking off things that we spoke about earlier, is engaging in mindfulness, giving yourself meditation, breathing techniques, helping to kind of work through it. And journaling goes really well. A lot of times, with journaling, you can use it in any way that works well for you, but journaling, sometimes people just want to write stuff down, things that are on the mind. A lot of times processing things from your head into different elements can work really well because you kind of clear up that headspace within your head. And the other part is also looking at integrating it with like a gratitude journal, looking at what you've done well, what you're proud of, your accomplishments, your achievements, and also talking about the challenges you faced and how you can address those from happening next time. So you start to develop more of a problem-solving approach. And again, that ties in again with looking at different perspectives, looking at different elements, different approaches as well to how to solve your challenges and your difficulties. Yes, thank you, Hannah.
Over to me now, I believe. So thank you, Alex.
I appreciate it.
So yeah, thank you so much for that. I'm gonna talk a bit on the app now, and how Thrive can actually really help in these sorts of situations. Um, so using the app can really help to reduce these stresses that we've been talking about in life. Um, I'm going to go into them in more detail, but obviously, as Oleg said, doing breathing exercises is really useful. And there is a breathing exercise within the Thrive app, calm breathing, something that if you were in a situation that you suddenly felt those feelings of stress, anxiety, panic, worry, something like calm breathing and breathing exercises can really help to calm you down, adjust to the situation, prepare yourself for what's to come. It can really help you to, yeah, just prepare yourself for that specific situation and be less stressed, less worried. The same with the meditation on the app. There are lots of different meditation sessions to try. So I really would recommend trying those out as well, because again, they have the same outcome. They can help with those feelings of stress and anxiety that we might be having. And CBT as well. So the CBT program in its entirety is within the Thrive service. It's something that's proven to be extremely good for reducing stress and also improving your resilience as well. Something that I mentioned earlier on the call, but it's a course that I've taken. It was something that I didn't really know about before joining Thrive, but took it as I, of course, became an employee here. And it's been really beneficial to me in my working situations, in my personal life. It's a course that's known as a really valuable life skill as well. So it's not just for if you're feeling unwell, it's for everybody. And a course that I can really recommend taking to help with those feelings of stress and building resilience as well. Something else that the app can help with is the daily checkups as well. And I'm going to talk a bit in more detail about those. But just before we move forward with what is within the app that can help with this, just to reassure everyone that the app is a completely safe and secure solution. It's completely confidential, clinically validated by the NHS. So for those of you that are worried about using the service, and there really is nothing to worry about. Like I said, it's completely confidential. No one at Thrive or your employer will see any information that you enter into the service. so you can feel completely confident that everything is personal to you, and any information that you enter won't be shared or won't be seen by anyone else. So this is really how the app works, and what we want the app to do. We want to identify any conditions early. So if you are struggling from stress or anxiety, these are the sorts of things that the app is going to pick up when you start entering information, that confidential information that I mentioned about. Then going to, if you are struggling, if you are displaying symptoms of anxiety, depression, or stress, we're going to provide you with the support services necessary. So that could be dialing out to other services, it could be accessing therapy within the app, or accessing the tools and techniques within the app as well. So the aim is to have that accessible treatment to help you to recover and to build resilience as well. So it does begin with the daily checkup, and that's how we're really going to assess you as the user for any feelings of anxiety, depression, of stress that you might be feeling. So there's an example up there on the screen of how that looks, but essentially you're going to be asked how you're feeling. There's images to display your mood. You're asked about your mood and to rate that mood. And then you're going to be asked a set of questions. These are clinically validated tools, as we said, approved by the NHS. And these are the same questions that if you were to go to your GP and talk about your mental health, they would ask you the same set of questions. The reason why we do this is so that we can catch any kind of issues early, any kind of challenges that you may be struggling with early on, to then help you direct you towards those support services and any support within the app that you might need. So a big element of the app is the chat and the therapy service. So luckily we've got an expert on the call with us today in Olex. But everyone that uses the service will know that the chat is kind of there to help you if you are struggling. Obviously, you receive a if you do take the assessment and you show signs of you show symptoms of anxiety or depression, a therapist does proactively reach out to you and offer you that support. So you don't have to worry about reaching out yourself, but there is the potential to reach out yourself as well. You are able to start a chat with a therapist without taking the assessment and get that immediate support that you need. The chats with the therapist, they can be via text, they can be video call, phone call. It's whatever kind of works best for you. But as I said, we do have Olex on the call. So is there anything you want to kind of add to that, Olex?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. I mean, I guess just sort of piggybacking off what you're saying. We're all really nice, lovely staff and friendly here as well. We're all very understanding as therapists, and we're all come from different backgrounds, capacities, skill sets, even forms of therapeutic practices. But be rest assured, nothing here is scary and stuff like that. And I know for a lot of people, there is still that stigma about going to therapy, and there is that stigma that, oh, maybe there's someone out there who needs it more, or maybe I could be seen as weak and going to therapy. And the reality is, though, none of that is true. You can be the most strong-willed, strongest, toughest person out there, but there's nothing wrong with getting a helping hand. The way I describe and see therapy is it's kind of like a pit stop. An F1 car is very good and very sufficient, but it's also needs regular maintenance, also needs to have its tires changed and stuff like that. And same principle here with therapy. You come in, you have a pit stop, you talk about your problems, your issues, your difficulties, your challenges, develop that skill set, those tools and that knowledge, and off you go applying it to the real world. And you sort of learn a little bit more about yourself, you learn about how to kind of cope and deal with those challenges and difficulties. And the triage assessment is relatively quite straightforward. It takes about half an hour to 45 minutes, maybe sometimes an hour, but essentially it helps us to understand a bit more about your challenges, your difficulties. Some of the questions are a bit personal, but these are primarily for safeguarding. And again, everything that we acquire information-wise is not shared or given out to anyone within the workplace or anything like that. It's all confidential. The data the information is only held for safeguarding purposes because we take responsibility for your well-being in case of any concerns and risks. And then after that, we then would assign you a therapist, and usually there will be a bit of a waiting time between triaging, assessing, and then waiting for a therapist. But we try to make sure it's a bit of a quick turnaround, shall we say. But therapy-wise, we are very sort of accommodating to your needs, and whatever it is you need to focus on and address will be there to kind of help you work through that. And again, as Hannah mentioned, you can do it via text, via voice, via video calling. And I've had clients before in the past ask, "Oh, do I have to just stick with one?" And the answer to that is no, you don't. You can start with texting, and as you become comfortable, you develop a form of rapport and trust with your therapist, switch up to voice and video calling. And I've had a few clients that have done that as well. And hopefully you can probably tell by me as well from today, I'm quite an easygoing, laid back therapist as well. And it's quite nice having that kind of report in that aspect. At the end of the day, no one's going to force anything onto you. We're all quite lovely. We're all quite friendly and professional here. The way I can describe a therapy environment is I'm an expert with the tools and knowledge and understanding on how to kind of manage with difficulties, but you are the expert of your life. You are the expert of what brought you into therapy, what the issues and problems are. And we work together in a collaborative approach to help you work through and resolve your issues and difficulties. And that's kind of us in a nutshell. And if you do have any kind of questions, there will be room towards the end for any questions or concerns or any kind of queries from a therapeutic stance. You're more than welcome to ask those in the chat. But yes, thanks, Anna.
Thank you, Alex. So there is a lot more to the service, aside from just the therapy. As we've said, there's meditation, calm breathing, which we spoke about, deep muscle relaxation as well. This is a really powerful technique for helping with sleep, especially. So as we know and as we alluded to, getting exercise, healthy diet, getting enough sleep, all of these things can really help with any kind of feelings of anxiety that you might be having. So to do this exercise that can really kind of help out with your sleep is a really good one that I can recommend. Applied relaxation as well. This is currently within the service, although this is an update that we're working on at Thrive that is going to be launching within the app very soon. So if you are a user of the app, make sure to keep updating and going on the service, because you'll be able to see that update soon there as well. So I've seen a few messages within the chat about an access code. Obviously, everyone's access codes are different. But if you wanted to download the service, you can scan that QR code on the screen there. When you sign up for the first time, you'll be asked for an email address and password. As we said, the service is completely confidential, so the email address that you enter won't be seen by your employer or anyone at Thrive. So feel free to make that whichever email address you feel most comfortable with entering. But once you've done that, you'll need to enter an access code. I would recommend, if anyone is looking for their access code, to reach out to your HR team or wellbeing team, or if you prefer, to send us a message, and someone from the customer success team, so myself or one of my colleagues, will be able to get back to you with your access code and how you can access. But once you have signed up, you'll be then sent an activation email. Just be sure to check in your junk or spam inbox for that, because it might go into there. It should be sent immediately though. So as soon as you've signed up, check in your email. And then once you've activated, you'll be able to start using the service. You should see the daily checkup, which is the first thing that you'll see when you log in. So it's always worthwhile to complete that, as we've said, to assess you for any kind of feelings of stress, anxiety that you might be having. So then we can use the app and use Olex and his team as well to offer any support that is necessary. Um, but that is the end for us today. So I'm just gonna open up the chat and the Q&A as well. Is to see if anyone has any questions they would like to ask. But feel free to put them into the chat or the Q&A box. I think I saw a question pop up, which was from someone that said, do we have any tips on public speaking? Um, I know that for me, before doing this webinar, before going to visit some clients where I've had to speak in front of a room of, a lot of people, sometimes hundreds of people, something that I do like to do is the calm breathing exercise, because that can really, as I said, help you to prepare for that sort of situation. And it does help to calm you down and then feel in a better place to be able to get up there and present. Um, do you have anything that you want to add to that, Olex, as the expert?
Yeah, absolutely. And I did see that question pop up, and I was just thinking about just jumping in the bandwagon for that. I mean, to be honest, I had a really big fear of public speaking when I was younger. And to be fair, it is actually relatively quite normal. Because you kind of put yourself out there, you put yourself in the public domain. One thing that worked for me, now again, take this with a pinch of salt. Don't do what I say in that aspect. But what I did for myself was I just started taking up acting. I actually jumped deep end and just started engaging in theatre performances and acting and stuff like that to kind of put myself out there. But the way you kind of do from a more therapeutic stance is by questioning the rationale and the logic. A lot of times when we are worried about public speaking, it's more about, oh, am I going to make mistakes? Are people going to make fun of me? Are people going to laugh? Am I talking enough? Am I presenting well? Am I going to get judged? And stuff like that. Now, the truth of the matter is, everyone's going to have a sense of judgments. That's just how humans are in a nutshell. But doesn't mean it's all bad. What I'm trying to say here is it's also about becoming comfortable in your own skin, understanding the purpose and the aims of what it is you're doing to present. Once you channel your energy into what it is you're trying to accomplish or achieve, then everything else becomes a little bit more numb and quietened down because you're going in with a purpose. But also from a CBT perspective, you start to kind of question the logic. You start to question the facts and the evidence behind it. And even asking yourself what real world implications. How many times have you recalled someone making a mistake and how much importance did it bring to you in your life? So for example, if you're walking the street and someone trips over, sure, that might give you a bit of a giggle, or you might sort of be worried about that person. But at the end of the day, it's not something that's going to have a massive impact on your everyday life. So once you start to kind of address those sense of severity and sense of importance and do experiments to kind of put yourself out there, the more you become comfortable with something, the less worried you become of it because you have real world implications of practice and experience when it comes to it. So hopefully that's been quite helpful and useful.
Thank you, Alex. I've got another question here, if you wouldn't mind answering.
Yep.
Um, it is, if you are in a regular state of overwhelm, often the list of things that you could be doing to help yourself also present themselves as extra things to do and can make you feel defeated further. What are your thoughts for managing that scenario?
That's a good question. I think it's about kind of breaking them down and chunking it. I mean, in what sense are you feeling defeat, and why would you be feeling defeated? So this is what I mentioned earlier about looking at perspective, looking at the logic and the rationale, and then you start to chunk it. So you need to start to gradually get back. I mean, this is very sort of simple layman terms here, but it's getting back into a sense of habits and routine and finding something that kind of gives you a sense of reward. But when it comes to looking at defeat, it's also like that innate fear of failure. And the reality is, though, failure or form of defeat is a part of life, but doesn't mean it has to be something that defines you. It's something you grow and learn from. So once you start to shift your pattern and your thought process, when you look at a problem or a dilemma, then you start to develop more of a problem-solving approach. But you start to look at it from a different perspective, and a different angle. And that's kind of, I guess, a very simple layman's terms approach when it comes to kind of dealing with that. And hopefully that's answered the question in a kind of in a rough context.
Thank you, Alex. Just looking through the chat, someone has said, is the app the only way to access this sort of support? You can access Thrive via the web as well. I will post in that a link to the chat for anyone that wants to see that. But just having a look through the other questions. Um, and if anyone wants to add any questions into the chat or to the Q&A box, then please feel free to do so.
I guess one that I just spotted now was about how to deal with social anxiety about going out.
Mhm.
Social anxiety is a very good one, and there's a very common difficulty and challenge that I work with clients. And again, kind of adding and reiterating what I mentioned earlier, it's about that exposure. It's about also listing and writing down what it is you're worried about. And there's something that we use in therapy called the thought record. So with a thought record, you start to look at a situation, look at a problem, you look at the emotions and sensations it brings to you. But then you start to kind of look at the facts and the evidence that you have to support these kind of claims. So is a social anxiety triggered by a worry about interacting with people? Is there a worry about people making some form of judgments or some people criticizing you for your choices or whatever you're trying to purchase or buy? And then you start to look at the facts and the evidence. And then you look at the facts that support that, you look at the facts against this claim. So what evidence do you have against this? And chances are it's usually, well, no one's actually said anything bad about your shopping, or no one said anything terrible about what it is you went out to do or get to buy. Now, a lot of times we call those drastic thought patterns as black and white thinking. And then you start to find a middle ground, look at the gray area. And once you start to develop more of a realistic, balanced perspective, and you tie that in with exposure work, such as behavioral experiments, you push yourself out there, and you start to look at the facts that okay, I went to the shop, I bought myself a drink or bought a chocolate or something like that. Did anything bad happen? No, not per se. And the very common elements that we deal with when it comes to anxiety and social anxiety is what we call the spotlight hypothesis, where you assume that the world's a stage, everyone's watching you, everyone's judging you, and so on and so forth. But the reality is, though, everyone's in their own little bubble, everyone's doing their own little thing. And interestingly enough, chances are the person that you walk past, the person next to you, is probably more anxious than you are. So the real question here is, what purpose does it serve, and what are you trying to protect yourself from happening? And you start to look at the facts, the evidence, and you kind of will start to gradually reshape and reframe your way of thinking by also integrating with experiments and exposure work. And again, that's kind of a limited layman's term summary of that.
So another question has come in. I'm really struggling and I've had 3 weeks off sick recently. It's building up again. I have no motivation, constant unease, and poor sleep. It's really unpleasant. Will the app help? Do you want to take that one, Alex, or do you want me to take that one?
I'm easygoing. If you want to, you can talk about the app and I can plug in some of the therapy stuff.
Yeah, sure. Um, So yeah, in short, the app can help with that. As I said, the poor sleep, so a session within Thrive that can really help with sleep is a deep muscle relaxation. So I'd really recommend to try out that as a technique. It's essentially about tensing and relaxing your muscles um, throughout your entire body, and it brings you to a nice kind of relaxed state, and it can help you to get off to sleep. And so I definitely recommend trying that one out. I would recommend doing the daily checkup because depending on the answers that you enter in, you'll be offered some further support within the service as well. So I can definitely recommend opening the app, doing the daily checkup, and using the support on offer. But specifically for sleep, the deep muscle relaxation exercise can really help with that.
Yeah, and to sort of add on top of that, it's very important to carry on with your routine, carry on with your daily kind of habits. Because last thing you want to do is to completely go cold turkey and sort of cave in. So one thing I recommend to a lot of my clients is set yourself between 3 to 5 tasks to do in a day. It has to be nothing too drastic. It could be something as simple as making the bed, brushing your teeth, going for a shower, going for a walk, trying to cook a meal. Um, and in that moment of time, it might seem like a big tedious task, but as you start to gradually get back and sort of kickstart the engine, shall we say, you start to kind of regain that sense of motivation, that drive again, fulfillment, and also engage in your activity you enjoy doing. I know a lot of times with like depressed symptoms and low mood, things become a bit grey. You don't find pleasure or enjoyment doing in doing the things you used to do. But as a lot of people mentioned today, and as Hannah and I mentioned earlier, going for a walk, going outdoors can be quite refreshing. The weather's nicer now, the sun's out, spring's upon us, and that can be quite a nice uh, boost and motivator and gives you a clearer head and perspective. And also interacting with people, spending time with friends and family can also go a long way as well. Because the last thing you want to do is kind of curl up like a hermit back into your rabbit hole and just hide away from the world because that's just going to reinforce a negative cycle. And it's important to start to address it early on before it gets worse, because then it makes it 10 times harder to get back into that and break out that cycle. So once you understand your early indicators, your early sort of triggers, you can then start to intervene them directly by setting up those kind of parameters, those goals.
Perfect. Thank you, Alex. It looks like that's all the questions that we have. Um, I can see there are a few more coming in about access code. I would speak to your maybe HR team or wellbeing team, or you can contact us at Thrive, and you'll be directed to your customer success manager. It could be me or someone else on my team, that will be able to provide you with your company access code. Obviously, we can't say them all out on this call because they're private to you and your company. So get in touch with us if someone in your organization doesn't know the code. Um, are there any more questions from anyone at all relating to this topic? Please put them into the chat or to the Q&A box. But thank you to everyone for joining. If not,
No, likewise. Thank you very much, and hopefully it's been helpful and useful as well. Oh, just saw a question. If you're not happy with the therapist you have, yes. So if you're not too happy or you don't really get along with the therapist you have, you can definitely ask to get a different therapist, and that's something that we will be able to do internally from our elements as therapists and as triage therapists to help kind of meet your parameters. So again, that is something that we can accommodate and help you out with if you feel you don't fully connect with your therapist.
perfect. Well, if there are no more questions, I'll just give everyone another few seconds or so to ask anything. But if there are, oh, it looks like there's a question. How to get through working long term with colleagues of conflicting personalities who don't agree with you on anything in work?
Hmm.
Might have to hand that one over to you, Alex.
That is a very good question. I mean, clashes unfortunately are quite common, especially with conflicting personalities. I think it's important to, in an ideal world, is try to find a middle ground, try to find an approach that works best for you, and trying to find a solution that's favorable to both. But sometimes individuals will want to have some form of control or some form of power play. And this way, you need to start to potentially even look at other elements of integration. What I mean by that is looking at mediators or talking to other individuals within the hierarchy, within the workplace, might potentially help you. But also sometimes worthwhile to listen a bit more as well, trying to hear out the other individual sort of dilemmas and trying to provide more, I guess, more of a balanced perspective and overview. It can be quite a difficult one because when you have conflicts of personality, sometimes you're not always going to agree on everything. Maybe a form of compromise can also be quite helpful. But if the individual is being quite difficult or quite challenging, then it might be worthwhile to potentially look at getting further help from an external individual, such as a mediator, that can help in that aspect. Hopefully, it's been somewhat useful, the advice.
Thanks, Alex. It looks like we have another one. about tips for dealing with grief and loss.
So from a therapy perspective, within Thrive, yes, we do have therapists and individuals who are experienced and knowledgeable when it comes to dealing with grief and loss. And I know it's not a very pleasant and easy time to work through, but yes, if you're able to access the service for that measure, then please do. I will be able to help you with that. So yeah.
Okay, it looks like we've answered all the questions now. Hopefully everyone got those in. You can always follow up with us afterwards on email if there's any other questions. The presentation will be sent out tomorrow with the recording as well, if you want to share that with any of your colleagues. We've just got another question. I have someone currently off with anxiety fatigue. How would you help with that? Do you have any tips for that, Alex?
I guess when it comes to dealing with anxiety fatigue, it's also trying to understand a bit more about what has actually been causing this. What could we try to accommodate to help them be reintroduced back into the workplace? So maybe a gradual integration or reducing amounts of tasks that they do. So again, sort of easing them back into a routine and daily habits. And again, utilizing the things we spoke about today as well. When it comes to dealing with stress and anxiety, can also be a helpful tool in the measure. And if you're able to share potentially even this recording with them, that'd be fantastic because they can turn to this as well and integrating that with the app as well. But from an employer perspective, I think gradual integration and being accommodating towards their needs and what it is that's causing the anxiety could be quite helpful in that ways too.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Like I said, the presentation and the recording will be sent out tomorrow. I think Ella's put in the chat that you can always email the marketing email as well, and we can send that directly to you. But thank you to everyone for joining, and I hope that everyone has a good rest of their day.
Take care. It was nice meeting you.
Bye, everyone.